I'm guessing probably most of you recognize the beginning of the second movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata. Just in case you don't, here's how it sounds. And what lots of you channel regulars are used to me doing, which I've actually done with this movement before, is going through the entire piece or the entire movement and kind of picking out some of the coolest moments, the coolest chord progressions, kind of the key things that make the piece special and explain them to you. Well, in this video, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to focus on just the first 8 measures and try to understand them really, really well. And in fact, you can learn about 10 different theory concepts, just the first 8 measures. With that being said, let's jump in here to measure 1 and figure out what makes this one of the most popular Beethoven tunes of all time. Okay, we start out with an A flat major chord. That's not too shocking. Let's put it in context. We're immediately followed by an E flat 7 chord, E flat G, B flat, D flat. Now, I've said before on the channel many times, there are multiple types of 7th chords. This is like the key one to focus on. If you only learn one 7th chord, I mean, this 7th chord alone is going to come up multiple times in this video. It's the 5-7 chord. We call it 5-7 chord because in a key like A flat, it naturally occurs on the 5th scale degree. And the thing you need to know about 5-7 chords is they want to go back to 1. They have a drive to 1. If I play a progression for you, and I stop there, you're not happy. You want the piece to go on. Now, does it always go to 1? Sorry about that. There you go. Does it always go to 1? No, obviously composers do cool things. Sometimes they trick us. Sometimes there's neat resolutions. But in general, that's one of the basic chords of classical music, and actually music in general, is this wants to go. And now more specifically, not only does this 5 wants to go to 1, but of that 5 chord, the 7th note in particular wants to fall. So if it's hiding here in the middle, it still wants to fall to there. If it's on the bottom, it still wants to fall. So the 5-7 chord wants to go to 1, and specifically that 7 wants to fall down. So check out the 2nd chord again. The 7th is in the bass. I'm not going to call this rare. At this point, we're 2 chords in. A lot of things can happen and have happened. However, if you just analyze 100 classical pieces, you're only going to see this trick a couple times. It's not as common as a traditional bass line. 1-5-1 bass line is more common, or even 1 down the 7 up to 1. That's way more common. This is actually more often harmonized with a 4 chord, but Beethoven throws in the 5 chord here and puts that super dissonant note in the bass, which makes the resolution so sweet. We're only 3 chords in. We get this. That has to fall, and when that does, that melody leaps up a 4th to make that really sweet interval. And it does go to an A flat chord. Again, will a 7th chord always go to 1? No, but the rule to take away from this is typically it goes to 1, and that's definitely where expectations should be. So first rule, 5 goes to 1, and in particular, look for where the 7th is. In this case, the 7th on the bass is really special because it drags the piece downward. Now, what's this? Well, a 5 chord again, E flat, G, B flat, but we're missing that D flat. Check out the right hand top note here. We have a suspension, not really a suspension because the E flat fits in the E flat chord, but Beethoven delays giving us the D flat. Well, what's the D flat? It's our 7th. Again, the most dissonant note. It's tough to say between the G and the D flat. They're very dissonant together, but the D flat probably is more dissonant. It's also dissonant with the E flat, but he holds out on that most dissonant note for an extra moment and then gives us. And just like before, the D flat, the 7th, the chordal 7th wants to go down to a C. So put it all together, your first 2 measures plus 1 chord is 3 chords, 1, 5, 1, 5. So the basic analysis, 1, 5, 1, 5 is completely fine and accurate. The more specific analysis is 1 chord, 5, 7, but the 7's in the bass, which we call 5, 4, 2, which we're not going to get into in the scope of this video. I think I have a video where I've talked about this. I'll put in the link in the description below if I can find it. But then it goes to a 1 chord in first inversion. Then we go to the same 5 chord. However, it's been inverted now and that 7's been thrown on top. And then, where's the 7th? Delayed right there. All right, let's turn on to measure 3, which actually contains 2 of the things you're going to learn in this video. Thing number 1 is actually sort of an exception to the rule. The G is called the leading tone. That's the scale degree 7th, not the 7th of the chord, but the 7th of the scale. We call it the leading tone. It often wants to push up. Fairly important in certain situations, like when it's on the top or on the bottom. Well, in this case, we get this, then we get this. Now, if you've never heard this before, you would have to expect this is the leading tone that wants to go. That would be really common. I mean, a million pieces go. Really common progression. So Beethoven does this, and this. Well, first of all, the 5 chord goes to a 6 chord. That's not too weird. That's a little deceptive move, but it's actually not crazy. Actually, the weirder thing is the fact the bass gets away with not resolving, but walking down. So how does Beethoven do this? There's kind of 2 big factors. One factor, I would say probably the easier factor, is just it's a walk down. And I know it sounds like a cop-out, but it's not. He's just connecting it by step. It's a stepward march down to F. Beethoven's on A flat. He could have jumped directly to F, but he's like, no, I want to march through the G on the way down to get to here. The other thing that kind of makes this work is the outward motion of the right hand. Both hands kind of pressing out towards a goal just sounds good to our ears. So thing to learn here is that yes, leading tones want to resolve up. I put that slightly lower priority than chordal 7s want to fall, because you will find more exceptions to the rules. Like right here, this leading tone doesn't do it. There's many ways to get around it. The way Beethoven does it here is he kind of uses it as a passing tone to get down to the F, and then also the upward motion, and the upper part going higher, higher, higher is balancing out the lower marching part down below. Another really big thing to learn in measure 3 is the final chord. You can see there's an accidental there. So even if you aren't chord music theory inclined, you can be like, oh, there's something added to this chord. I know that D natural does not belong in the key, so something's going on here. Let's try to put all these notes together and figure out what chord we're playing. We have a D natural, a B flat on top, an A flat, and an F in the left hand. If we unflip all of this, we end up with a B flat 7 chord. It's actually the same chord we had earlier, the E flat 7, a major chord with a minor 7th, B flat major with a minor 7. It's the same chord. However, the B flat 7 does not fit in the key of A flat. I told you that the 5/7 chord is often called the 5/7, the dominant 7, because it's so often built on the 5 chord. It fits on the 5 chord. If we go to the key of C for a second, all white keys. The great demonstration of this is that you do all white keys. The 5 chord is the only 5/7 chord. That's this major chord, minor 7. So in the key of A flat, we shouldn't really have a B7 chord, a B major chord with a minor 7th, but it's there. Almost always when you see a 5/7 chord, it's actually going to be a 5/7 chord. Even if you're not in the right key, it's actually going to be the 5 chord of something, even though it doesn't belong. So in this case, what you have to do is do some backwards logic. Ask yourself, okay, if B flat 7 is a 5 chord, what is it a 5 chord of? Well, B flat 7, you can pause the video if you want to, but I'll tell you just a second here. B flat 7 is the 5th note of which scale, of which key? Well, E flat. It actually doesn't matter if it's E flat major or E flat minor. In this case, I mean, E flat major was our key we expect more, but still, it doesn't matter. It's the 5 of E flat. So B flat 7 is the 5 chord of E flat. So in a composition, what a composer can do, instead of going directly to the 5 chord, instead of going directly to an E flat chord, they can throw in the 5 of the 5 chord first. Just like the 5 chord E flat wants to go to A flat, the 5 of the 5, which is B flat 7, wants to go to E flat. So that chord, now you're feeling this drive to E flat. You're not feeling a drive anymore to A flat, right? You want the piece to go to E flat, and then it can go back to A flat. You can do 5 of anything. You can be in the key of A flat. You can do a 5 of 2. Well, my 2 is B flat minor. What's the 5 of B flat minor? F. You can do an F7 chord, F major, throw in the minor 7. That's your 5 of 2. This one's 2. Go to B flat minor. In this case, I'm in the key of A flat. I want to go to my 2. I could go to F7 first, like this. Okay, so measure 3 on top of having this passing now has a 5 of 5, a B flat 7 that really wants to go to 5, really wants to go to E flat, and it does. The next measure, E flat. And you feel this E flat's a little more, it feels more like a resolution, right? The E flats earlier all felt dissonant. Resolve. Dissonant. Resolve. But here, because the B flat 7 is dissonant and resolves to the E flat, it makes the E flat feel a little more stable. Okay, we're coming up on the weirdest chord. I would almost say the only controversial chord of the first 8 measures. There's complicated chords, but of these first 8 measures, I would say most people who are deep into music theory are going to be pretty universal. I'm going to say this, and then like a theory professor is going to say, well, I'm a music theory professor. I think you're wrong about measure 1. That's not a flat chord. That's a W chord. But that aside, most things are pretty universal here. We can use slightly different terminology, but I think the analysis is fairly simple. This is where things kind of get into weird territory, and there's going to be this tension between the obvious correct answer and then what our ears hear. Okay? I will explain what I mean in a second. The E flat's easy. I would even say this E natural is a fairly easy chromaticism. Here's a new thing. You can add this to one of the 10 things you're learning in this video. Sometimes we just have chromaticism, like a chromatic note that passes through a note, and we don't analyze it. If you're playing Mozart and you go, or please don't analyze that as F minor, F major, F minor, F major, F minor, F major, F minor, F major. I mean, yeah, for a split second, you might technically get an F minor chord, even if it's spelled G sharp, but it's an F minor chord. But please don't call it F minor. Sometimes the answer should just be chromaticism. That is the best chord. If you get too into trying to analyze all the chromaticism, especially when it's not chordal, it's just a chromatic note, that's when you get some of these weird chord charts you see online, especially when they're like computer generated and you're reading Beethoven. It's like C add 13 with a sharp 9, and you're like, really? That's cool, but wrong. Okay, chromaticism. We're not analyzing that note, but this is where it gets really weird. Okay, we're going to do the boring, straightforward. If you asked a computer to analyze this, what they would tell you first. I don't know if they have these cool computers out there yet, but if they did. This is a G half diminished 7, literally. Like if you look at this note, it is a G half diminished 7. There's a G, there's a B flat, there's a D flat, and there's an F. The only problem is G half diminished 7 doesn't fit great in the key. And this is where we're going to have to use our gut a little bit here. The other problem with this is that F does not feel like a chord tone to me. Let me play those two measures together. That feels like it belongs, right? I feel this tension where this feels like it shouldn't be there. Again, we're going to have this little conflict here. This is the most controversial chord, like I said. If you want to call this a G half diminished 7 in second inversion, you're technically not wrong. Now, the most common place to see a half diminished 7th is a 2 chord in a minor key, and this would be a 2 chord in the key of F minor, which is nowhere to be seen. You could also see it as the 7 chord, but often 7th chords are turned into fully diminished 7th chords, but it is possible. It's possible. That would be the only way to kind of justify this. But, oh, this is the 7 in our original key. But it doesn't really feel like that to me at all. So this is where the weird analysis comes in. I'm going to just tell you what I call this chord first, and then I'll explain myself. I'll explain my actions. This is an E flat 7 chord. Okay? Measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, E flat 7, the whole thing. That is Ryan's analysis, because that's what my ear hears. Sometimes you have to stop and ask yourself, what is my ear actually hearing? And I think all of that measure is an E flat 7, even though there's barely an E flat in it. I mean, at the very end, we do sneak one in the bottom part of the harmony. But this, I think, clearly is a high note that should resolve down to E flat. This is not a chord tone, but that is. Right? Are you with me there? We're doing this. That belongs to the chord. My ear goes ding, 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 ding. That belongs. I can't hear that as belonging. If you do, I guess more power to you. I mean, I don't, but that does. That feels great. Now, here's what makes that analysis so weird: is we're on an E flat, we go away from E flat. I'm calling this an E flat 7 chord, and the melody does this, and then it goes below the E flat, but it never touches it, and it goes up. And if you look at just that measure, you're tempted to be like, Ryan, you're completely crazy. The melody never even resolves to E flat. Yeah, that's what's cool about this. This entire measure is trying to get back to E flat because the note's too high. F is wrong. It needs to get to E flat. It overshoots. Now it's going to scoop back up to E flat. And by the time it finally gets to E flat, the harmony shifted underneath. So you kind of get two things. The F resolves to E flat, and this B flat scoops up to E flat simultaneously. Notice again, the 7th in the bass, and it resolves down like it should. Now remember, when the melody gets to E flat, the chord shifts. One chord, and then we have really the only difficult chord left. This one's not vague though. This is completely 100% clear, even though it is a little more complicated. If we play that chord in stacks of thirds, we end up with an F chord, with an F major chord, with a minor 7 on top. This is another 5 chord. This is our third 5 chord that's different. We had E flat 7 multiple times. We've had a B7. Now we've had an F7. And just like the other ones, we're going to assume that this is a 5-7 chord. We're going to assume this is a 5 of something. So what is F the 5 of? F is the 5th note in which scale? Hopefully you got it. F is the 5th note in the key of B flat. So this is the 5 chord of B flat. Now what is B flat in the key of A flat? It's our 2 chord. So we would call this a 5 of 2. If you look at measure 6, 1, the next measure is going to go to 2. Beethoven can go directly there. Maybe not exactly with that voice leading, but the basic chords work. You can go 1 to 2. Perfectly fine. Actually, 1 to 2 to 5 to 1 is about to be what happens right here. You can go 2. Again, not with this exact voice leading, but the idea works. So Beethoven is trying to intensify that, so he throws in a 5 of 2 first. And then he gets to the 2 chord. So that's what that is. One time I was in class, and this one student, if you're listening to this, hi, I'm not picking on you for saying this, but we were listening to this piece in theory class, and we got to this point here, and this one violinist goes, "Why is that note so ugly?" We were all like, "Oh, that's our favorite note. How dare you pick on it?" But it's funny because I was so used to the sound in my ear, I don't think of this note being weird. And that's what often happens when we listen to a piece. But for her, she'd never heard it, and she's like, that is kind of a weird resolution, right? But again, you're doing a 1 chord to a 5 of 2, and then it's going to go to 2 right here. Now, before we talk more about this 2 chord, I just want to say that lots of the ideas we've learned today are more concrete things you can kind of learn as rules. As much as anything can kind of be a rule of music, right? Things are going to be broken, but just really good ideas. Like, these are how these chords actually function. This is how composers use these chords. However, the next thing I want to teach you is just kind of a really cool idea to keep in mind when looking at pieces. And that's that often when pieces get going, they kind of first start off, you're going to tend to see more 1-5, 1-5, 1, 5-5, 5, 1-6, 5, 1 progressions without 4 chords, but especially without 2 chords. Now, I know when I say that, some of you immediately can think of a piece where the second chord's a 2 chord. I know I can too. That's why I'm saying this is more just a concept to keep in mind. Sometimes composers, not all the time, but sometimes they withhold the more deep, rich progressions until later in the piece. Because if you go 1-5, 1-5, 1-5, 1-5, there's a very different sound in a progression that has a 2 chord in it. The 2 chord really kind of can signal the end of the phrase, which is what Beethoven does here. He withholds any 2 chords until he gets all the way to the second to last measure. And this 2 chord can kind of become an auditory clue. You're like, oh, we've just been going 1-5, 1-5, 1-5. There's been 5 of 5. There's been a 6 chord. Then we get a 5 of 2. Just a good thing to keep in mind. Just like keep your eyes open to progressions that just start off, I would say, more simple with 1-5, 1-5, 1-5 sort of progressions, and then save the subdominant, the 4s, and especially the 2s, the 2 7s, and the inverted 2s for later on in the phrase. Okay, just something to keep in mind. Then after the 2 chord, we do go 5-5-5-5, and it's a great 5-5-5-5. The left hand stuck on the 7th, the right hand fills in all the gaps, and then there's one more cool thing that happens. If you look at the left hand, if you're only looking at the left hand, you're like, oh, the piece just ends exactly as it should. You do a 2 chord, 2s typically go to 5, and 5 should resolve to 1. Cool. It's perfectly normal, right? Well, if you look at the right hand, at the same time the left hand's behaving, the right hand goes, oh, I really want to play the 5 chord just one more time. And they go. So they don't resolve at the same time. The right hand gets stuck on the 5 chord for an extra beat. This is the really common Mozart idea, but Beethoven does it here. We're going to resolve. That needs to resolve to A flat. All that needs to resolve to A flat chord. And the left hand does. And the right hand does. There. Now, if we went on to analyze the rest of the piece, will we learn more? Yeah, for sure. There's plenty more to get from this piece. My whole idea of this video was let's just really zoom in on just 8 measures and try to understand just 8 measures of a piece really deeply. A great next step for you will be pull out a piece that you've played and try to apply some of the ideas that we've found in this video to that piece. Start making those connections where it's just not Pathetique second movement, but it's pieces that you know in different contexts now as well. Before you go, if you haven't yet, please like the video and comment something positive down below. That is really helpful. People ask sometimes, how can we help you grow the channel? One of the best things you can do is watch the videos back to start to finish. That's great. Like the videos, and then commenting is really, really nice. YouTube gets all excited because people are engaging with the video. So I really appreciate it. Thanks guys for hanging out for a little bit. See you guys in the next video.